10-year-old boy buys an ill-serviced dog at auction. What happens next will amaze you. The auction yard seethes like a furnace. Grit in the teeth, sun knifing down, a loudspeaker coughing through numbers no one hears. Because everyone is jostling for healthy stock and quick profit. Past the penned steers and glossy horses waits the final crate, half swallowed by shadow. Inside, a German shepherd, gaunt, bandaged paw, tucked tight, watches the world with desert amber eyes that never blink. Boots grind gravel. A man laughs, not worth a nickel, and turns his back as if turning a page. Jacob Miller, 10, small jaw set, grips a crumpled envelope. $45 earned, mowing lawns and selling lemonade for a bike. He can already feel flying downhill. He stops at the crate. The shepherd's breath rasps, then evens, as if the boy has turned down the volume on all the hurt. A bent tag winks under the matted collar, letters almost gone. Jacob leans closer. Canine. Officer, what? His heart trips. The auctioneer lifts a gavel, bored and ready to move on. Last lot, he drones. Feedback cracking. Dust spirals between them like a rope. Jacob's mother's voice whispers from the back of his mind. Be careful. Another whisper answers. Be brave. The boy raises his hand. I'll buy him, he says, voice shaking but steady enough to carry. Laughter hiccups, then stalls. Heads swivel. The dog's eyes fix on the boy as if recognizing a command no one else heard. Something invisible shifts, like a door unlatching. A siren wails somewhere distant. The shepherd flinches, then stares harder, waiting, remembering. Jacob doesn't breathe, yet. The gavel hangs. The crowd holds its breath. Behind the auction barn, smoke threads the sky. The dog shifts, listening as if to duty once more. What happened next will shock you. Have you ever seen courage in an unexpected place? Drop it in the comment. Sun presses hard on the auction yard, a glare that turns rails into hot lines and makes every breath taste like dust. Jacob Miller squints while a loudspeaker crackles above laughter and snapped bids. Men in dark hats lean on fences, boots hooked on rungs, eyes hunting quick profit. Cattle clatter past. Paint horses toss manes. The air holds hay and diesel. Near a stack of pallets, a wire crate sits half in shade. Inside, a German shepherd lies on its ribs with a bandaged paw drawn tight. His coat, once black and tan, has thinned. His water bowl carries dust. When people laugh, the dog flinches, then goes still, as if stillness keeps pain from spreading. Jacob stops and kneels. Amber eyes catch his, and do not leave. Jacob is 10, slight, with freckles across his nose, wearing a faded flannel and patched jeans. He holds a wrinkled envelope. Inside lie $45 earned by mowing yards, scraping weeds from a neighbor's path, and selling lemonade where few cars stop. He had planned a second-hand bike, with decent brakes. He pictured coasting down the slope, behind the barn. That picture fades now. The shepherd watches. He does not look away. Home sits 8 miles down a cracked lane, beyond mesquite and cotton fields that trade good years for lean ones. Sarah Miller keeps the place going with long shifts at the diner, pouring coffee and calling strangers Han because kindness brings tips. A photograph of Jacob's father hangs by the stove. He left for a job one September morning and never came back. Since then, the house has held quiet in corners. Sarah teaches Jacob to fix what can be fixed, and to carry what cannot with both hands. Being overlooked at school taught him to listen. The empty chair at supper taught him to notice hurt without making it louder. Back at the yard, numbers ride the speaker in a dry chant. Goats rattle through a pen, and bring a cheer when a bidder snaps a price. Past that swirl, the crate holds its still shape. The dog's breath leaves fogs on the wire. A bent tag winks under the collar. Letters nearly gone. Jacob leans and thinks he sees a canine and a half-worn name. He wonders who tied the bandage, and where care ran out. His fingers hover. Hey, he whispers. Ears twitch. The tail stays quiet. Men cluster nearby, counting wins. A rancher glances over, and snorts. Not worth feed, he says, dragging his heel. Another shakes his head, and keeps walking. The world rushes toward things that promise more, not toward a problem with sharp bones and patient eyes. Jacob steadies himself against heat and judgment. A thought steps forward inside him, stubborn and clear. Sometimes the right thing is the small thing nobody else wants. The auctioneer flips a card, thumb black with ink. Final crate, he announces. One dog, minor issue. Laughter tips out of a pocket of cowboys. Minor, someone repeats, drawing the word long. Jacob sets the envelope against his chest. He pictures the bike, and lets it go like a kite whose string has started to burn. He pictures the kitchen at home, his mother's shoulders after midnight, and feels a tug that is not fear, it is resolved. He thinks about the money, 3 5s, 3 10s, and a wrinkled 20 with a taped corner. Months made that stack. Lawns grew slowly during the drought. Lemonade wilted on days when the wind would not quit. A grown man could shrug at that amount. For a boy it is a fortune, yet a fortune can be measured by what it buys. If it buys mercy, maybe it multiplies. Sarah would say they cannot afford complication. She keeps a ledger with columns for gas, feed and school shoes. She does not keep a column for miracles. Even so, she once told him that a heart is an account too, and kindness is never wasted. He wants to be the kind of son who can shoulder something heavy and walk it home. The auctioneer calls a number that is really an insult. No cards rise. He shrugs and makes it smaller. Dust hangs like a curtain. Jacob feels his heartbeat in his throat. He lifts his chin. Sir, he says, not loud but steady. The auctioneer blinks at the child's voice. What do you want, kid? Jacob steps forward until the platform's shadow cools his toes. I want to bid, he answers. Laughter jumps. Someone mutters, this'll be good. He holds up the envelope. 45. A murmur runs along the fence. A woman in sunglasses folds her arms. A teenager balances on the rail. The shepherd shifts. A small adjustment that might as well be a flare. Jacob keeps going because stopping would feel like dropping a friend. I can take care of him, he says. I can work more. I don't need a butt. His voice thins, yet he does not swallow it back. The auctioneer looks at the dog, then at the boy again. He scratches his jaw with a pencil. 45 from the kid, he says into the mic. Any other interest? Silence answers. Boots scrape. Someone coughs. No cards rise. The pencil taps wood twice. The shepherd's eyes stay on the boy like a wire between them. Jacob names the dog inside his head because names make promises. Rusty. That fits. Warm as iron left in the sun. He kneels by the crate again. The bandage shows a crooked knot tied in a hurry. He does not touch. He simply lets Rusty see a face that will not flinch. I'm here, he murmurs. Ears tilt toward the sound. Behind him, the auctioneer clears his throat and tries again to provoke a better price. Nothing moves, except a rancher near the back calls, let the kid do it. Dog's done anyway. Another voice says, takes guts. The auctioneer glances down. Jacob opens the envelope, slides the money out, and holds it flat so the wind cannot blow it away. The bills look small against the world's demand. They look exactly the size of promise. The auctioneer nods without smiling. He clicks the gavel in his hand, not bringing it down yet. He scans the rail one last time, giving Wealth a final chance to speak. Wealth stays quiet. All right, he says. 45. Going once. Going twice. A boot shifts. A card lifts, then drops. Jacob's pulse stutters. He does not blink. He thinks about feed, shoes and the bicycle that will not happen. He thinks about the life in the crate, and how sometimes saving one thing saves a person too. The gavel lifts high. The pause stretches until the air feels thin. Sold to the kid, the auctioneer says at last. Sound returns. A whistle, a slap on wood, a whoop. Around him the yard leaks heat in wavering sheets. Smell of alfalfa, smoke and iron tilting the afternoon. A sparrow bursts from the rafter. Somewhere a screen door slams. None of it touches the quiet inside Jacob's choice. Jacob tucks the empty envelope in his pocket, and lowers himself to the wire. Rusty, he whispers, you're coming home. Sun presses hard on the auction yard, a glare that turns rails into hot lines and makes every breath taste like dust. Jacob Miller squints while a loudspeaker crackles above laughter and snapped bids. Men in dark hats lean on fences, boots hooked on rungs, eyes hunting quick profit. Cattle clatter past. Paint horses toss manes. The air holds hay and diesel. Near a stack of pallets, a wire crate sits half in shade. Inside, a German shepherd lies on its ribs with a bandaged paw drawn tight. His coat, once black and tan, has thinned. His water bowl carries dust. When people laugh, the dog flinches, then goes still, as if stillness keeps pain from spreading. Jacob stops and kneels. Amber eyes catch his, and do not leave. Jacob is 10, slight, with freckles across his nose, wearing a faded flannel and patched jeans. He holds a wrinkled envelope. Inside lie $45 earned by mowing yards, scraping weeds from a neighbor's path, and selling lemonade where few cars stop. He had planned a second-hand bike with decent brakes. He pictured coasting down the slope behind the barn. That picture fades now. The shepherd watches. He does not look away. Home sits 8 miles down a cracked lane, beyond mesquite and cotton fields that trade good years for lean ones. Sarah Miller keeps the place going with long shifts at the diner, pouring coffee and calling strangers on because kindness brings tips. A photograph of Jacob's father hangs by the stove. He left for a job one September morning and never came back. Since then, the house has held quiet in corners. Sarah teaches Jacob to fix what can be fixed and to carry what cannot, with both hands. Being overlooked at school taught him to listen. The empty chair at supper taught him to notice hurt without making it louder. Back at the yard, numbers ride the speaker in a dry chant. Goats rattle through a pen and bring a cheer when a bidder snaps a price. Past that swirl, the crate holds its still shape. The dog's breath leaves fogs on the wire. A bent tag winks under the collar, letters nearly gone. Jacob leans and thinks he sees a canine and a half-worn name. He wonders who tied the bandage and where care ran out. His fingers hover. "Hey," he whispers. Ears twitch. The tail stays quiet. Men cluster nearby, counting wins. A rancher glances over and snorts. "Not worth feed," he says, dragging his heel. Another shakes his head and keeps walking. The world rushes toward things that promise more, not toward a problem with sharp bones and patient eyes. Jacob steadies himself against heat and judgment. A thought steps forward inside him, stubborn and clear. Sometimes the right thing is the small thing nobody else wants. The auctioneer flips a card, thumb black with ink. "Final crate," he announces. "One dog, minor issues." Laughter tips out of a pocket of cowboys. "Minor," someone repeats, drawing the word long. Jacob sets the envelope against his chest. He pictures the bike and lets it go like a kite whose string has started to burn. He pictures the kitchen at home, his mother's shoulders after midnight, and feels a tug that is not fear. It is resolved. He thinks about the money. 3 5s, 3 10s, and a wrinkled 20 with a taped corner. Months made that stack. Lawns grew slowly during the drought. Lemonade wilted on days when the wind would not quit. A grown man could shrug at that amount. For a boy it is a fortune, yet a fortune can be measured by what it buys. If it buys mercy, maybe it multiplies. Sarah would say they cannot afford complication. She keeps a ledger with columns for gas, feed, and school shoes. She does not keep a column for miracles. Even so, she once told him that a heart is an account too, and kindness is never wasted. He wants to be the kind of son who can shoulder something heavy and walk it home. The auctioneer calls a number that is really an insult. No cards rise. He shrugs and makes it smaller. Dust hangs like a curtain. Jacob feels his heartbeat in his throat. He lifts his chin. "Sir," he says, not loud but steady. The auctioneer blinks at the child's voice. "What do you want, kid?" Jacob steps forward until the platform's shadow cools his toes. "I want to bid," he answers. Laughter jumps. Someone mutters, "This'll be good." He holds up the envelope. 45. A murmur runs along the fence. A woman in sunglasses folds her arms. A teenager balances on the rail. The shepherd shifts, a small adjustment that might as well be a flare. Jacob keeps going because stopping would feel like dropping a friend. "I can take care of him," he says. "I can work more. I don't need a bike." His voice thins, yet he does not swallow it back. The auctioneer looks at the dog, then at the boy again. He scratches his jaw with a pencil. 45 from the kid, he says, into the mic. Any other interest? Silence answers. Boots scrape. Someone coughs. No cards rise. The pencil taps wood twice. The shepherd's eyes stay on the boy like a wire between them. Jacob names the dog inside his head because names make promises. Rusty. That fits, warm as iron left in the sun. He kneels by the crate again. The bandage shows a crooked knot tied in a hurry. He does not touch. He simply lets Rusty see a face that will not flinch. I'm here, he murmurs. Ears tilt toward the sound. Behind him, the auctioneer clears his throat and tries again to provoke a better price. Nothing moves, except the heat. A rancher near the back calls. Let the kid do it. Dog's done anyway. Another voice says. Takes guts. The auctioneer glances down. Jacob opens the envelope, slides the money out, and holds it flat so the wind cannot blow it away. The bills look small against the world's demand. They look exactly the size of promise. The auctioneer nods without smiling. He clicks the gavel in his hand, not bringing it down yet. He scans the rail one last time, giving Wealth a final chance to speak. Wealth stays quiet. All right, he says. 45, going once. Going twice. A boot shifts. A card lifts, then drops. Jacob's pulse stutters. He does not blink. He thinks about feed, shoes, and the bicycle that will not happen. He thinks about the life in the crate and how sometimes saving one thing saves a person too. The gavel lifts high. The pause stretches until the air feels thin. Sold to the kid, the auctioneer says at last. Sound returns, a whistle, a slap on wood, a whoop. Around him, the yard leaks heat in wavering sheets. Smell of alfalfa, smoke and iron tilting the afternoon. A sparrow bursts from the rafters. Somewhere a screen door slams. None of it touches the quiet inside Jacob's choice. Jacob tucks the empty envelope in his pocket and lowers himself to the wire. Rusty, he whispers, you're coming home. Dawn lays a thin apricot band across the Miller farmhouse. As Jacob wakes to the soft thump of Rusty's tail, the dog tries to rise, fails, and settles with a breath that rattles like paper. Jacob pulls on yesterday's jeans, slips past his mother's door, and checks the coin jar. He pockets $2 for feed, leaves a note, and guides Rusty into the yard for a slow circle under the cottonwood. Afterward, he cleans the bandage, steadies the trembling paw, and tells the shepherd they will try again after breakfast. By 8, he has a plan. He prints a cardboard sign, e.g.'s, cold drinks, car wash, pay what you can, and props it by the mailbox with a cooler and a crate of brown eggs. The first truck roars past, the second stops. Mrs. Alvarez buys a dozen and 2 bottles of water. You helping your mama? She asks. Helping a friend, Jacob says, eyes flicking toward the porch where Rusty sleeps in the shade. He packs the carton and pockets the payment like a promise. All morning, he scrubs tires, the hose hissing, foam sliding down chrome that mirrors his small face. By noon, his shirt sticks to his back. He counts bills and coins and imagines medicine lined like little flags of hope. A boy from school pedals by, still saving for that bike. Jacob keeps a light smile, different purchase. The boy glances at Rusty's bandaged paw and rides on. At the feed store, Jacob asks for something gentle for a dog who won't eat much. The clerk leads him to supplements. Start here, the man says. Keep the wound clean. Jacob buys gauze, a cheap thermometer, and canned food with a bright label, then returns the clearance sneakers he had carried a minute too long. In the barn, he fashions a corner with a blanket, a low bowl, and a box fan. He warms a spoonful of food with water and hides crushed pills inside. Rusty noses the bowl, looks away, noses again, and finally licks. Jacob exhales for a whole morning. He sits on the floor and hums the pickup tune his father used to tap. The dog swallows, rests his muzzle on the boy's ankle, and sleeps. Evening piles up chores, feed for the hens, a sagging hinge, a broom across the porch. Between them, Jacob rinses the wound, whispers an apology when Rusty flinches, and replaces the bandage with hands that try not to shake. Sarah watches from the doorway with a dish towel. We can't keep this pace forever, she says. He nods because arguing would spend coins they do not have. He refills water and adds a second blanket when the wind shifts cool. On the third morning, Rusty tries to stand, muscles ripple under thin fur, then fail. Jacob slips his arms beneath the chest and shares the balance. 2 steps, then a fold. He lowers the weight slowly, waits for the breathing to settle, then strokes between the ears until the tremor loosens. The day becomes a rhythm. Stand, fold, rest, try again. Small gains hide inside careful minutes. People begin to notice the sign. Some stop with coins, others stop to advise. At the gas station, a mechanic wipes a rag over blackened knuckles. "Kid, that dog's done," he says. A teenager near the soda cooler snorts. "Get a puppy." Jacob buys a bag of ice and leaves without argument. On the sidewalk, he repeats the dog's name like a quiet shield. Rusty. Night brings a memory that does not belong to him. Sirens braid through sleep. A hallway stretches slick with water. Officer James Holt runs. Voice steady. "Stay," he orders, palm flat. Rusty quivers with stored lightning, but obeys until the order changes in the smoke. "Go." The door bursts. Heat slaps the ceiling. The dog darts through and vanishes in the noise. A blast knocks him into a wall. He rises anyway, dragging weight. The picture drops away, as if someone turned off the lights. Days stack. Jacob's hands toughen. The jar fills and empties. He washes a pastor's pickup and a tourist's rental, hears talk of weather and wells, and learns that kindness carries many accents. Mrs. Alvarez returns with tortillas and a vial of honey. "For strength," she says. He thanks her, then tucks $1 into her palm, because pride also needs feeding. Mockery still comes, tossed like beer caps. "Useless mutt," a man mutters when Rusty staggers and drops. "Waste of feed," another says. Jacob keeps his tongue because arguing spends energy he owes to care. He measures progress in inches, a bowl empty by morning, a tail ticking twice, eyes that blink slow as pain loosens its grip. Sarah adds an extra shift and returns with sore feet. She rubs Rusty's neck in a circle. "I'll ask the vet to stop by," she says. The vet visits after closing, checks gums, nods at the cleaned wound, and speaks about hydration and calories. "You're doing right by him." He leaves saline and advises Jacob to pocket it like a folded bill. Work keeps finding him. He weeds a widow's garden, carries groceries for a man with a bad knee, and moves bricks for a shopkeeper who pays in pie. He accepts the pie, then crumbles the crust into broth for Rusty. The dog's eyes brighten like coins in water. Jacob feels the evening pause before sliding past the eaves. Every afternoon, the flashback edges in, while the barn smells of hay and dust dampened by a stray sprinkle. Holt's hand lifts again. The command Rusty holds, then breaks toward danger, not for glory, but for a heartbeat. He knows by cadence. The wall, the smoke, the dragging weight, the sudden hush. Jacob wakes from it standing in the doorway, fingers tight on the jamb, whispering the dog's name into the slow-turning fan. Bills grow like weeds. Jacob sells more eggs, cleans more wheels, and says no to new shoes when his toes press hard against the canvas. "School's soon," Sarah warns. He nods and adds the money to the jar. He has learned that some seasons demand bare feet inside old shoes. On the 7th evening, a gust drags the smell of rain across the fields. The hens fuss and jump to roost. Sarah sets pots under the roof drip. Lightning scribbles far off. Jacob checks the barn and finds Rusty sitting upright, ears canted, listening to something only he can hear. Thunder bumps the horizon. The dog whines, then gathers himself into a compact, deliberate shape. Jacob kneels with both hands open. The flash washes the rafters white. Rusty plants his front feet, knees tremble. He lifts his chest, leans into his own weight, and rises. One step, he holds. Another, closer, as if crossing a thin bridge no one else can see. Jacob does not breathe. The rain begins, soft on the tin roof. The third step lands like a truth earned through 7 long days. Rusty's nose touches Jacob's palm. Warm breath blooms across the boy's lifeline. Jacob lets out a sound that is a laugh and a prayer together. Outside, the storm finds its voice. In the barn, hope, fragile and fierce, finds its feet and stands beside them. Wind built all day, raking the cotton rows, until leaves flashed silver and dust lifted in nervous veils. By late afternoon, the sky sagged and pressed the land like a lid. The first rolling thud made the farmhouse windows tap. Rusty lifted his head, ears pricking at a frequency Jacob could almost see. Jacob set down the hinge wrench and knelt. "Easy, buddy, with me." The dog paced 3 steps, turned, paced again, eyes not leaving the boy. Jacob held his palm open. "Here." Rusty touched it with a tentative nose, then looked toward the door, where rain smell pushed ahead of the storm. Rain arrived as freckles on the yard, then thickened into a sheet that blurred the fields. Sarah called from the porch to latch the coop and pull the feed bin under cover. Jacob nodded and kept Rusty close, hand open, breath quiet. When the lights went out, Jacob stayed steady. "Down," he said, palm sliding. Rusty folded, trembling but listening. "Stay." When the worst rumble moved away, Jacob brought a flashlight and borrowed books. Covers showed working dogs in harness, handlers with open hands, and one word that tugged him forward. He read aloud to steady both of them. "Keep commands short, and pair each with a gesture. Reward the instant the behavior happens. Patience beats force every time." He raised 2 fingers and tried the first step. "Sit." Rusty settled, chin lifted, eyes searching the boy's face for meaning. "Down." The shepherd lowered with a soft groan. "Stay." The body held. They practiced until the rhythm felt like a song. After each success, Jacob gave soft words and a touch where the fur stayed thick. The storm tested them with jabs of sound. Rusty startled, then looked to Jacob to confirm safety. "You did not erase fear," the book said. "You built a better path." By dusk, the rain eased to threads. The yard smelled like clean dirt and wet iron. Sarah brought a towel and a pan of stew to the barn, then paused in the doorway, watching lamplight fold around boy and dog. Jacob lifted 2 fingers. "Watch this. Sit." Rusty sat steady as a rock in a stream. Sarah's breath left in a sound near laughter. After they ate, Jacob found a straight stick under the cottonwood. "Easy game," he told Rusty, keeping the word calm. A short toss landed 5 paces away, on swept board. Rusty limped toward it with stitched determination, clamped the wood, then turned for home. "Good," the boy said. "Again, if you're willing." They kept throws short, rests long. Thunder faded into rumor. Jacob angled the next toss toward the door, onto damp grass, still jeweled with rain. Rusty hesitated at the threshold, then committed, stepping into the storm smell without breaking the bright thread between them. He brought the stick back slower, but taller. Jacob laughed quietly. "You're fighting, Rusty," he said, and the words felt like a key turning in a long-stuck lock. Inside again, Jacob read by the flashlight while the shepherd rested. He learned about scent games that build confidence, about partners who cue each other with breath and posture, about honor earned in alleys and quiet homes nobody fit. He traced a photo of a team at attention and whispered the name he had half read on the bent tag from the sale yard. "Holt." He set the stick behind a bale, rubbed it once across Rusty's blanket, then drew a lazy line across the floor with 2 fingers. "Find," he said, letting the syllable ride breath instead of snapping. Rusty lowered his head and worked the invisible trail, nosed the corner, puzzled the turn, then rooted behind the bale with a small victorious huff. Jacob clapped once, touch, praise. A car whispered along the road. Rusty listened without panic, checking Jacob first. Jacob remembered the laughter near the soda cooler, the man with grease on his hands, who said "done," the shoes he returned so a jar could fill. He rubbed the ridge between Rusty's ears, grateful for the way the dog answered to kindness, as if kindness itself were a command. They tried stay again, counting slow, ending the set while want still outweighed fatigue. Stars pushed through torn clouds. Jacob threw the stick once more, a soft arc that landed where the porch light made a pale coin on the grass. Rusty went after it, with that uneven but relentless gait, returned and set the prize into Jacob's palm as if laying down an old story and choosing a new one. The boy looked up, speaking to anyone who needed proof that effort can become hope. Ever had a moment that gave you hope against all odds? Comment below. Your story inspires us. He let the line hang in the dark like a banner, then folded it away because the next choice mattered more than any sentence. He ran his hand along Rusty's neck, where healthier fur was reclaiming ground, and remembered the sale yard heat and the dismissive voice. They were wrong, he said. Sure now. Rusty leaned into the words as if they carried weight he could share. From the porch, Sarah watched in the loosened night. She saw her son's shoulders notched with less caution, his steps no longer braced against an invisible shove. She saw a dog, who listened harder than many people, answering not only to words, but to the quiet behind them. She remembered her ledger, with neat columns, and the one she had never drawn for miracles. Puddles mirrored the yard light. Rusty settled with his head on Jacob's boot, eyes half closed but ready. Jacob scratched his chest in slow lines, and felt his own breathing match the calmer tempo. Before they went inside, Jacob gave one last cue. Stay. He stepped back 3 paces, counted, returned and rewarded. Then he pointed at the blanket. Bed. Rusty rose, limped to the nest they had made together, circled, and lay down with a sound that belonged more to satisfaction than pain. He licked the boy's wrist once, brief and solemn, a seal on the day's work. Jacob touched his forehead to the shepherd's, and breathed thanks. On the porch, Sarah wiped her face with a knuckle, and laughed at herself. She had feared the dog would be another weight on a house already carrying too much. Instead, she watched a child earn back part of his own light, by lending it to a creature who refused to quit. The realization landed soft and certain. Her son was healing, beside the partner he chose when everyone else walked past. She turned the porch light brighter, and left the door open, making a path for both of them to come in when they were ready. The thunder kept climbing, and dropping like heavy steps on an invisible stair, but each command gave Rusty a rung to hold, and each praise stitched a little quiet into the room. When the lamp hummed again, Jacob did not rush the work. He let the small winds breathe. Crickets restarted at the fence line, and the storm drifted off like a truck fading down a long highway slow. The pan coughed oil across the burner, and the flame jumped, a quick blue flick turning orange as it climbed the curtain's edge. Jacob smelled it before he saw it, a bitter bite that cut through cumin and corn. Sarah spun from the sink with a towel, slapped once twice, and watched cotton bloom into fire. Smoke flattened under the ceiling, thick, fast, decisive. The alarm began to scream. On the threshold, Rusty surged to his feet and barked a single clipped order that sounded like memory waking up. He shoved Jacob backward with a shoulder, pivoted to Sarah, and caught her apron hem, tugging her away from the heat, without breaking skin. He planted himself between flame and family, pulled again, then angled toward the door like a shepherd steering a panicked flock. Paint crackled, a pan rolled, dragging sparks. The latch fought Jacob's fingers, then gave daylight, slapped them. Cold air tasted like water. Rusty backed Sarah down the steps in careful increments, paws hitting each board as if rehearsed. Gravel took her weight. She dropped to her knees, coughing, eyes watering. Rusty touched her shoulder with his nose, counted the breath, then pivoted toward the hallway with a low, urgent sound. Jacob snagged his collar. Wait. The dog looked at him, then beyond him, toward the living room where a single photograph hung above the piano. His father, denim jacket, late light. Rusty twisted free with a move too smooth to be new. He disappeared into smoke without hesitation. Heat forced Jacob back 2 steps. Cabinets complained. The corridor pulsed like a throat. Rusty, he shouted. 2 short barks answered from the left. He dropped to his elbows the way a library book had advised for smoke, and crawled, shirt over his mouth, eyes streaming, palms skidding on grit. The living room had become a cave, full of orange ghosts. Ceiling paint blistered. The picture's glass winked in looping light. Rusty stood beneath it, braced, teeth clamped on the ribbon. Sarah tied there the day the photograph went up. He tugged once, twice, 3 times. The nail screamed and let go. The frame thumped his shoulder. He kept hold of the print and turned. Jacob rose into a gap and stumbled forward, catching the doorframe with one hand and the back of the couch with the other. Together they made the hall before air rushed and fire chased them, like a jealous thing. Jacob kicked a burning rug aside, clearing the path. Rusty carried the photograph low, body canted to shield the paper from sparks. The house breathed hard behind them, then gave up. They burst onto the porch. Sound changed. Light felt like rescue. Sarah reached and took the print with shaking fingers, the face intact, corners curled. Rusty collapsed on gravel, sides heaving. Jacob fell beside him and wrapped both arms around the smoke-sweet neck. "You saved us, boy," Jacob said, voice broken into a laugh and a sob at once. Rusty's tail tapped once. Again, a soft metronome that measured survival. He nudged Jacob's wrist as if reminding the boy to breathe too. Sirens unwound along the road, thin at first, then near, then inside the yard. Engines found their lines with practiced grace. Firefighters shouldered tools and vanished into the heat, with the calm of people who walk into the night for a living. Neighbors arrived without planning. Mrs. Alvarez clutched her robe, prayer changing languages between syllables. The mechanic from the station stood with his rag still in his pocket, and his mouth half open. A teenager rolled up on a bike, forgot to smirk, and just watched. Hoses hammered windows. Steam lifted. The porch chime bent into an oval, gave one tired note. A medic knelt by Rusty, and opened a plastic case. "May I?" he asked. Jacob nodded, hands still on fur. The man fitted a small oxygen mask and turned the valve. The shepherd tolerated the cone, eyes locked on Jacob's face, as if permission lived there. "Partner," the medic murmured, almost to himself. Sarah checked Jacob's lashes, lips, wrists, then kissed his temple and touched Rusty's singed ear with a sound that was only gratitude. The fire captain crossed the yard, helmet under one arm, soot drawing commas at the corners of his smile. "We caught it before the roof," he said. Wind helped. So did a fast call. He looked down at Rusty. So did he. The mechanic nodded once. A small apology for every doubt thrown earlier in the week. Miss Alvarez set a bottle of water by Jacob's knee, and stepped back to give the moment room. Inside, crews tore down blistered curtains, and slapped foam across cabinets. Outside, steam thinned and the alarm finally choked silent. A firefighter carried the warped pan into the grass and set it down like a lesson. Another brought out the box fan. The housing melted a little on one edge. Oil flash. Someone said. Sarah squeezed Jacob's shoulder. "We're here," she whispered, then looked at Rusty. "Because of you." Rusty blinked slowly, and nosed the mask aside, wanting air that touched Jacob first. The boy folded closer and felt the hammering heart behind ribs that had once seemed too sharp for a fight. Illness had not erased purpose. Training had slept, not died. Instinct had bridged every distance. The dog who limped through rain for a stick had just run through fire for a father framed in paper. People drifted toward a respectful line, as if the yard had grown a rope. Phones hovered, then lowered. The pastor arrived with his coat misbuttoned, and his shoes wet. He knelt, touched Rusty's shoulder, and whispered thanks that went upward and sideways both. The teenager lifted his front wheel and let it thump down, restless. Then still, nobody asked for a show. They had seen one. The medic checked gums, nodded at the color returning, and loosened the bandage on the healing paw so circulation could keep its promise. "Fluids later," he said. "Cool shade. That ear needs salve." He looked at Jacob. "You did right." Jacob shook his head. He did. Rusty's tail flicked, a tired pennant refusing to drop. Engines idled down. Radios became murmurs. Wind lifted ash into a brief silver glitter, and carried it toward the fields. Sarah wrapped the photograph in a towel as if it might catch a chill, and held it against her wrist. Jacob stroked Rusty's neck in long lines, then the ridge of his chest where courage had gathered, and held like a knot. He brought his mouth to the good ear, and spoke the truth he owed. Steady now, certain, you're my hero, he whispered. Rusty's tail moved once, weak but sure, a salute that still found the beat. The captain tipped 2 fingers, and turned away. Hoses coiled, boots thudded off the porch. Neighbors drifted in twos, glancing back at the dog that had crossed smoke for a family that chose him. The yard settled into damp quiet, ash glittering on puddles. Sarah slid an arm around Jacob, the towel-wrapped photo safe between them. Rusty breathed deeper, eyes half closed, still watching the boy. Rest, Jacob said. The tale answered, faint and faithful, a small promise kept. Morning came clear over damp ash. Sarah worked a small stove on the porch, while Jacob checked Rusty's bandage. Gravel whispered at the fence. A sun-faded sedan stopped. A man stepped out and removed his hat, carrying himself with the economy of someone taught not to waste motion. James Holt, he said, showing a badge and card before slipping them away. Patrol, I heard about a house fire. A boy and a shepherd that pulled a woman clear. His gaze locked on Rusty and held the way a compass settles after wandering. May I? Jacob looked to Sarah. She nodded, wary and kind. Rusty rose, weight shifting forward, then back. Holt halted at the steps and crouched so he wouldn't tower. He splayed his hands, palms open. Partner, he murmured to the dog. The word slid through the morning like a key finding a lock that had waited months. Rusty's ears cocked. He stepped closer, nostrils working. Soap, leather, old smoke, the current of duty in bone. He tasted all of it. His tail moved once. Holt's mouth tugged as if a knot loosened. Rust, he said. Rustum, come. The old call sign unfurled like a ribbon. The shepherd closed the last inches, and leaned until his chest touched Holt's boots. You know him? Sarah asked, careful with hope. Holt nodded without looking away. K937. 2 years with my partner. SIRS and narcotics. We hit a riverfront lab on a warrant. Boilers under the floor. Tanks. Fumes. The first blast threw me. I ordered him out. His jaw tightened. He refused. He grabbed my vest strap and hauled, while the ceiling came apart. I lost him in the second blast. We found only wreckage and blood. I signed retirement papers for a partner I couldn't bury. Jacob had dreamed pieces of that without knowing. Alarms strobed across wet concrete. A steel door groaned. Heat roared. The dog pulled while the handler's radio died. He laid a palm on Rusty's neck, and felt the body recognize Holt more surely than any word. He turned up at an auction, Jacob said. Half bandaged. People laughed. I bought him with everything I had. Holt glanced at the wrapped paw, the healed scrapes, the clear eye. You did the rest, he said. Pride and sorrow braided. Someone else refused to quit. They moved to the porch shade. Sarah poured coffee into enamel cups and set a bowl for Rusty, who drank and lifted his head to watch Holt's hands. What does he answer to now? Holt asked. Rusty, Jacob said. He knows sit down, stay, and find. Heel is slow because of his leg. Holt smiled, small and real. You kept his mind working. That's how a working dog lives. Silence rested, not empty. Holt studied the towel-wrapped photo on the table. Your husband? He asked gently. Sarah nodded, thumb on a corner scorched by heat. He's gone. Rusty carried this out. Holt's throat tightened. He looked at the dog as if apology and gratitude shared one rib. He always goes to the thing a heart points at, he said. Even when it burned. What was he like on duty? Jacob asked. Holt's eyes warmed. Nose like a question that never quits. He'd sweep a hallway during a bomb threat and freeze at the right tile, then check me for the next move. After hard calls he'd rest his chin on my boot, counting the beat of us. The air lifted a memory none of them had planned to speak. Sprinklers hissed over concrete. Lights hiccuped. Holt wedged a pry bar and leveled his voice. Back. Rusty waited until the plan shattered. The blast broke time into white. Holt dropped and the shepherd lunged through smoke. Teeth on nylon, hauling while the ceiling coughed sparks and a tank moaned. He dragged once, twice, 3 times. A pressure wave slapped them apart. Silence filled the hallway. Rusty crawled into a black pocket and lay down because he would not leave the last place he knew. Holt existed. When the picture faded, Holt rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand. I wanted to go back, he said. Every day. Jacob shook his head. You tried. The building didn't care. He looked at Rusty's graying muzzle, at the gold in his eyes that hadn't dimmed. He still found us. Holt turned to Jacob as if recognizing a colleague. You gave him a second chance, he said. Jacob stood straighter and let a smile break. Not to argue but to set the balance true. He gave me one too. Sarah's hand found her son's shoulder and stayed there. May I see the tag? Holt asked. Jacob brought the bent oval from the drawer where he had kept it like a coin with a wick. Holt traced the stamped letters with his thumb. K937, he read. Handler Holt. A short laugh came, grief and relief braided. Time tried to erase us. It failed. Rusty rose, turned a neat circle, and sat with his flank touching Jacob's knee and his chest against Holt's shin. It wasn't a trick. It was a verdict. Holt exhaled. I won't ask to take him, he said, surprising the boy, who hadn't admitted that fear out loud. He chose you. Dogs decide home with their whole bodies. If I pulled him away, I'd fail the partnership we built. Let me help instead. Vet bills, food and some training refreshers. Call it settling what I owe. Sarah's gaze softened. We don't take advantage, she said. We say thank you and keep good books. Holt nodded. From his pocket he drew a silvered badge. Edges nicked. Number retired. This sat in my drawer like a weight, he said. It belongs near him now. Jacob lifted it the way a person handles a rare shell found after a storm. He didn't pin it. He let it sit in his palm while Rusty watched. Head tilted, mapping scent to memory and memory to the boy's skin. The moment asked for a witness beyond 3 people, and a dog. Jacob let his voice go soft and earnest, and turned just enough for anyone listening across screens and rooms. Have you ever been reunited with someone you thought you'd lost? Share your moment. It means the world. The words hung without breaking the quiet they honored. Holt rose, duty tugging, while reluctance tried to keep him still. I'll come back with scent tins and a harness, he said. We'll give him a simple search in the park on a good day. No hero stunt. Just work that feels like breathing. Jacob grinned. He's already rescuing my socks from under the couch. Holt laughed. We'll aim higher than laundry. Before leaving, Holt knelt again. He touched his forehead lightly to Rusty's and whispered something nobody else needed. The dog leaned as if to meet it halfway. The sedan turned and rolled out, dust lifting then falling. Rusty watched until the sound thinned. Then he swung back to Jacob and Sarah, settled at their feet and wagged his tail, slow and certain, because he had recognized his old partner and knew his new place, and both truths could live in him at once. Morning slid in bright and clean, washing the fields with mild gold that made cotton leaves glitter and the ash from the fire look like a bad dream. Finally rinsed away, Rusty met the day by rising without help, stretching long, testing the mended paw with careful steps, then trotting a small loop around the porch, as if drawing a new border between hurt and home. Jacob laced his scuffed shoes, slipped the retired K9 badge into his pocket, and opened his palm. Rusty touched it with his nose, checked the boy's face, and fell into step at his side, the way a compass needle finds north without drama. When a pickup passed, Rusty sat until the dust settled, and rose at a nod, a courtesy that made drivers lift 2 fingers from the wheel in acknowledgement. Training had become a language they both spoke without forcing a single word, and the sound of it was simply trust moving between them. At the diner, Sarah's friend stepped out to wave. The mechanic lifted his chin, apology and respect sharing one small gesture. Miss Alvarez pressed a paper sack that smelled of cinnamon into Jacob's hands, and said it was for later. No arguments. Kids on bikes coasted over, not to jeer but to ask if they could throw the stick once. Jacob kept throwing short and resting long. Rusty fetched with that determined, slightly crooked gait, returned proud, and set the prize into whichever hand the boy offered. Not because he was commanded, but because returning had become its own joy. By the second week, Rusty's coat thickened, his eyes brightened, and his appetite turned predictable in a way that soothed both the ledger and the spirit. He learned to heel on either side, to pause at roads, to carry a light canvas pouch without mouthing it. He learned that the hen house was off limits, that the tractor's growl meant stay back, and that the school bus emptied a tide of feet worth greeting with stillness rather than leaps. The town learned too. The kid who once chose a life others dismissed had been right, and the dog they called useless had simply been waiting for a reason to work again. Holt returned on a day, carrying a sincere breeze and a sky so blue it felt like a handshake. He stood by the fence with a training vest and a small set of scent tins, let Rusty see the gear, and waited until the dog chose the approach. Rusty tasted leather and memory, tail sketching a steady yes. Holt did not try to reclaim. He showed Jacob how to mark behavior without flooding it with words, how to cue with a shoulder instead of a shout, how to end while eagerness still bounced, so success would anticipate the next session. They worked for 5 minutes and rested for 10, then worked again, tiny bricks building a road. Afterward they drank coffee on the porch. Holt walked the fence line, took a long look at the mended house, and set a bundle of new wire by the steps without comment. Before he left, he placed a hand on Rusty's chest and glanced at Jacob. "He's your dog now, you're his home." The sentence landed and stayed. Jacob nodded, feeling the truth root deeper because someone who understood had said it clearly. Days made a reliable pattern. Jacob woke early to feed hens, pack his lunch, and measure Rusty's food, then took the lane with purpose. The shepherd trotted stronger each morning, head high, attention tuned to the boy. They practiced scent games that felt like play. They visited the park when school let out and helped a nervous child learn how to stand still while a big dog walked past without touching. They carried groceries for a grandmother, who insisted on paying with stories. They repaired the mailbox after a storm, and waved at the rural carrier as if mailing hope itself. Work rebuilt the house and the people in it. Sarah painted the kitchen a quiet yellow and installed a new alarm. The photograph of Jacob's father, cleaned and reframed, returned to the wall, this time anchored by a stud and a promise. On Sundays they turned the badge over in their palms, before setting it on the piano where morning light could find the number. Jacob did not dramatize the vow he felt. He kept it by keeping pace with the dog who had kept faith inside smoke. Some evenings when the heat softened and the land exhaled, Sarah sat on the steps and watched. She saw Jacob's shoulders loosen and his laugh come quicker. She saw how Rusty checked him before stepping into a road, how the boy used silence to say goodbye, how both respected the limits of a body that had wrestled flame. The town's memory lengthened. The mechanic, who once said done, changed the oil grat. The teenager who had smirked, designed a poster for a fundraiser to help the volunteer department replace hoses. The pastor stopped on his walk and taught Rusty a gentle hand target, then thanked the dog for reminding a congregation that loyalty wears fur as easily as a uniform. One afternoon, after errands and chores, Jacob led Rusty to the far field where the ground sloped toward a windbreak of old oaks. Dragonflies stitched the air, above irrigation water. The breeze smelled like cut grass and Jacob took the badge from his pocket and held it up so the sun could lay a coin of light across the worn numbers. He wasn't swearing himself into service, not the way Holt had, but a vow formed anyway. "I'll honor what you are," he said to Rusty. The dog flicked an ear, patient, present, as if vows were things he could smell. They walked until the light bent orange. Rusty's gait had settled into a steady 4-beat with only the faintest hitch left from the old wound, a rhythm so sure it answered every doubt. Jacob tucked the badge away and let his hand stay in his pocket, feeling the metal warm. He thought about the sale yard and laughter that tried to shrink him, about a boy who lifted his chin anyway, about the night a pan went wrong and a dog went right, about the morning when a stranger arrived and turned into a friend. Hope, it turned out, did not shout. It kept cadence. They stopped at the fence where the world opened wide. Jacob spoke softly, letting the line travel to anyone who needed it. "What's a bond that changed your life? Tell us below. Let's celebrate the heroes in our stories." He did not raise his voice. He meant it, and meaning did the carry. Rusty leaned against his leg, and looked out over the rows, as if inventorying everything worth guarding and finding none of it too big for a pair like them. On the walk back, they met Holt at the gate. He had arrived quietly, as always, with a notebook in his pocket, and a grin the dog recognized. He checked Rusty's gait, ruffled his chest, and asked Jacob to show a figure 8 on a loose lid. The boy did, proud but not showy. Holt closed the notebook without writing, tucked it under his arm, and repeated the sentence that still felt right every time. "He's your dog now, you're his home." Saying it again did not make it thinner, it made it true in wider circles. That night they ate on the porch. Beans, cornbread, slaw and melon. Rusty lay at Jacob's feet, head up, eyes half closed, the picture of a creature who knows the watch is shared. Dusk softened edges, crickets tuned. The kitchen window glowed with a new calm. Sarah looked from boy to dog and back again, then smiled in a way that reached deep and stayed. "You both found where you belong," she said. And the porch, the yard and the long lane to the road, felt exactly like that word. The courthouse lawn was filled with folding chairs and straw hats, while a brass band warmed up under a shade tent. A banner stretched between two pecans read "Community, thanks our braves," hand-painted letters leaning like smiles. Jacob and Rusty waited at the edge of the crowd near the gazebo steps. A boy in a clean shirt and a dog brushed until his coat caught the sun. Neighbors who had once doubted now lined the path with pride instead of questions. Children craned for a better look, whispering in the gleeful way children whisper when heroes are close enough to touch. The band landed on a bright chord, and the mayor lifted a small box tied with a blue ribbon. He spoke about smoke, quick thinking, a kid who refused to step away, and a shepherd who chose the heat to bring a family home. Then he called them forward. Jacob felt his knees go light, the world moving as if both steadier and larger than usual. Rusty trotted beside him, head high, ears tuned toward the voices that had once cut and now carried. They climbed together. The mayor crouched to Rusty's height, opened the box and brought out a brass medal stamped with a laurel ring and a single star. Holt handed over the collar Sarah had polished with oil, until it glowed like a deep river stone. The mayor fastened the medal beneath the plate that carried Rusty's name. The disc settled against the shepherd's chest with a weight that felt right, neither heavy nor showy, simply earned. Applause rolled across the lawn, then rose again, rougher, fuller, something like relief braided into celebration. Several firefighters saluted. A medic who had held an oxygen mask that night dabbed his eyes and laughed at himself. Jacob stepped to the microphone the way he had stepped to the auction rail, not to perform, but because truth needed plain words. He looked at Rusty first, then at faces he recognized from markets, church steps and tire bays, then at Holt, then at his mother. "He's not just a dog, he's family." The sentence landed clearly. Cheering broke loose. People stood. Someone whistled, joyful and unapologetic. Rusty's tail tapped time on the boards. Not flashy, just certain. Holt spoke next, voice low, carrying because sincerity always does. He told the town what a partner is on a long night, how teamwork looks at 3 in the morning, how courage often arrives as obedience to a small command spoken by love. He thanked Jacob for listening to a need nobody else heard at that dusty yard, for paying with everything he had, and then paying again with work, patience, and time. He thanked Sarah for betting the house on compassion when there were cheaper choices. He thanked Rusty for remembering duty through pain, and turning that memory into a rescue. After the speeches, the band played a waltz, while volunteers handed out lemonade and paper cups. Pictures happened because they must, the kind that later end up in frames above mantels, reminding kitchens and living rooms that grit and grace sometimes meet on Tuesday afternoons. A girl asked if Rusty shook hands. He offered a paw carefully, mindful of his healed leg. The mechanic moved close enough to say, gruff and sincere, that he had been wrong. Mrs. Alvarez kissed the top of Jacob's head and slipped a cinnamon roll into his hand for later. When the chairs folded and the brass cooled, the sun tilted toward evening. Jacob and Rusty slipped away down the lane, past the school, past the store with its squeaky bell, past the field that had learned their footsteps. They reached the old oak where dragonflies stitched invisible letters above the grass. The air tasted like sweet dust and cut hay. Shadows pooled around roots that had split the earth before any of them were born. Jacob sat with his back against the bark and set the retired canine badge in a square of light on his knee. Rusty lay beside him, chest rising in an easy rhythm, metal ticking once against the nameplate and settling. They did not speak for a while. Breathing did the talking, slow, matched and patient. When the sun lowered enough to pour honey through the leaves, Jacob leaned close. "We did it, Rusty. We got our second chance." The shepherd's ear flicked, his eyes soft. His tail traced one deliberate arc, as if signing a contract both of them had already honored. The day could have ended there, and would have been complete, yet one more circle wanted closed. Jacob lifted his face toward the place where screens sometimes sit and people watch, needing reminders that ordinary hands can make extraordinary steadiness. He smiled without performing. If this story moved you, hit like, share and subscribe. Drop your own story of courage below. Let's keep hope alive. What happens next will amaze you. He let the line travel across the invisible, until it belonged to whoever needed it most. The narrator inside the evening took over, not a person so much as a voice the town had earned by stepping closer to a truth together. It spoke softly about kindness that does not demand headlines, about second chances that start as choices nobody sees, about a boy who gave up a bike and gained a brother, about an officer who released what he loved so it could keep living, about a mother who balanced ledgers and still made room for miracles, and about a dog who remembered duty through pain and made a home out of loyalty. As the sun burned down to a bright line, the picture pulled back. The oak grew larger, the figures grew small. A boy and a dog became silhouettes cut from gold, metal glinting, badge winking, field breathing, sky vast, horizon clean. Music not quite heard lifted the edges of the frame. The story did not close, it settled. Somewhere sirens wailed for someone else, and another team answered. Somewhere, a kid picked up a broom and started helping. Somewhere, a stray watched a doorway and waited for a hand. Back on the lawn, volunteers stacked chairs and the last lemonade cup rolled to a stop by the stage. The banner sagged a little in the cooling breeze and then steadied. The engines idled, then eased away, leaving the curb as ordinary as it had been yesterday. The mayor folded the ribbon box and tucked it into his coat for the archive. The medic walked home lighter. Fire soot streaks faded from memory, replaced by a dog's determined gaze and a boy's steady voice. Under the oak, Jacob turned the badge once more and slid it back into his pocket. He rested his hand there, feeling the warm metal, like a small son he could carry. Rusty shifted closer and set his chin on Jacob's knee, watching the field the way sentries watch borders, calm and sure. Sarah stepped onto the lane, and paused a moment to take in both shapes beneath the branches. She smiled, tears bright, but easy. You both found where you belong. The wind answered by moving through the leaves like applause, a hush that somehow also sang. Crickets tuned. The first star. Evening went on, keeping watch while a medal glinted in the last gold and the retired badge held its quiet shine inside a pocket that would carry it home.